In this Warframe guide, I'm gonna show you the best weapons for returning players and those who aren't fresh beginners anymore, but at the same time wouldn't necessarily consider themselves endgame veterans just yet either. In short, what we're looking at today are Warframe's strongest and most reliable mid-game weapons, the workhorses that you'll spend the most time with and that will carry you all the way into endgame. I'm going to tell you what makes them so great, where to get them, and of course, how to properly mod them too. As you see, quite some stuff to talk about, so after a massive shout out to all my generous channel members who help me keep the lights on, let's jump right into it. Alright, first question, what weapons are we going to look at? Well, I would consider Mastery ranks 5 to 10 a solid range for mid-game gear. It's above the early game junk, but also not as demanding on the player as all the top tier equipment at Mastery ranks 12 to 15. So, with that being said, let's jump finally into our list with the first gun, and that would be, of course and to no surprise, the Soma. The Soma is an absolute Warframe legend, and it also has been for quite some time, so there's a bit to talk about. Being available from Mastery rank 6 on, the Soma is quite on the lower end on the list regarding Mastery ranks, but that does not mean that it is not powerful. In fact, the Soma is, for many Warframe players, a life-changing experience, so to speak. Once you reach Mastery rank 6, if you don't have the Soma, then what are you doing with your life? Honestly, the Soma is such a massive spike in damage output. With its fat crit rate and amazing crit multiplier, you're gonna be dealing damage numbers even in the 10,000s with a basic build like this one here. And for 1 second, speaking about builds, for every weapon on this list, I'm gonna show you one example build in the video, and this is also gonna be the build which you're gonna see performing in the background footage as we talk about the weapon. What you're seeing there is the build on its own without any external buffs on the weapon, so what you see here is what you get. And for every build, I try to make sure to use only mid-game accessible mods, nothing super fancy, but since we're not talking about the very early game weapons anymore, of course, all these builds will incorporate 8 mods, so if you want to rebuild them, you might have to add a catalyst and some format to reach it. But speaking about catalysts and forma, this is another great advantage of the Soma, because the Soma is one of the very few non-prime weapons in the game that comes with 2 innate polarities on their mod slots right out of the factory. So in order to reproduce the build that you're seeing right here, you only need to add 1 catalyst and 2 forma, and that's already it. So the Soma is a very cheap to build weapon, all the while packing a serious punch. But after all the praise, you might be wondering, Blacky, where do I get the Soma? And that's actually another big plus point because it's super easy. You just walk to the market console in your orbiter, buy the blueprint from there, go to your foundry, click build, and that's it. But let's stop looking at guns for a minute and switch over to one of the best swords in the entire game. Yes, you heard that right, not in the mid-game, in the entire game, and that would be the Broken War. Now, the first great thing about the Broken War is that you gain it after you complete the second Dream quest, and it will come with its own inventory slot, and it will already have a catalyst pre-installed, means you do not have to have these resources present, you just get the full broadside right away. But you might be wondering, what now makes the Broken War one of the best swords in the game? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It has absolutely beautiful stats. If we look at the build that you see in the background right here, we will always crit with every hit that we do, dealing 5.5 times the damage, and with a status chance of 32%, we're also going to deal a lot of slashes because the Broken War deals a lot of slash damage. What that means is, we will put out a metric buttload of critical damage overtime slash effects, which get further amplified if we add a damage to faction mod, in this case Smite Grineer, for even more bonus damage against the faction that we're up against. In general, whenever you go for a damage overtime build on any weapon in the game, you always want to make sure to have a damage to faction mod installed on that build. Oh, and by the way, if you ever find yourself wondering how to get some of the mods that you're seeing in the background right here, I already have a video on all the most important mods in the game and where to farm them. I'm gonna link it up there in the info card so you can check it out later. So, and while you're down there giving the video a like to make the YouTube gods not hate me, thanks for that by the way, let's look at our next weapon on the list. Remember how we just talked about the Broken War and its insane damage over time effects? Well, that is the same theory behind what makes the Phantasma so great. Because the Phantasma, while technically being a shotgun, is actually more like a laser beam rifle, and what it has to offer is a lot. A metric ton of status chance, so we can use that to our advantage and build it into status chance and pure heat damage to deal those nice heat over time damage effects to absolutely melt the enemy away. In case you're wondering how to get the Phantasma, it's also very easy. Just like the Soma, simply walk up to the market console in the Orbiter, buy the blueprint, build it, and there you go. Just in case you want to have the best Phantasma out there, you could also go for the Phantasma Prime because there is a Prime version of that by now, but you don't really need it, and the performance that you're going to be seeing in the background also works very, very nicely with the normal version too. And also, very quickly, I want to say something about the background footage that you see right here, not only with the Phantasma, but also previously with the Broken War. We're talking about mid-game weapons in this video, so you might have already been wondering, why are you seeing enemy levels above 100 in the Steel Path version of the game? This is not mid-game, this is late or even end-game content. Well, I chose to take some of our mid-game weapons with their mid-game builds into those end-game situations today, simply because they can handle that. And if those weapons can handle these situations, then believe me, they're absolutely gonna melt everything at star chart or even arbitration levels. And the next weapon that is also able to absolutely melt Steel Path enemies, as you already see in the background, would be the Skiayati or Skiayati, or actually I have no idea how to properly pronounce it, please don't kill me for it. This bad boy is a Nikana type weapon, and is actually not alone because what you're seeing in the background is a combination of two weapons that work very, very well together. On the one hand, of course, the Skiayati, and on the other hand, even though you're not seeing it in the footage right now, is the Daikyu bow that you can get if you go to your clan's dojo, head over to the Tenno lab, and get the blueprint for it from there. Now, why is the Skiayati to be combined with the Daikyu? Very simple, there exists a special Daikyu mod that gives any Nikana type weapon in the game, so the Skiayati, the Nikana Prime, and so on, the ability to have life steal, so you heal yourself whenever you deal damage to enemies. You might think this by itself is nothing special because we have mods like Life Strike or Healing Return, but you gotta keep in mind that these mods go onto your weapon itself, so you would lose one mod slot that could be dedicated to something that helps you deal more damage. If, however, you run a Nikana type weapon with the Daikyu and put the Daikyu mod on the Daikyu, that means your whole Nikana can be modded into dealing damage, and you just have to have the Daikyu kind of in your pocket and everything will be fine. You can't die, as you also see in the background. And the reason why we chose the Skiayati is simply because it's the most easy to access Nikana in the entire game, being given to the player for free after finishing the Excalibur Umbra quest, The Sacrifice. So you get the Skiayati with its Umbra polarities and all the nice Umbral mods that go with it, so you can build a very nice build onto it. And, as you also see in the background, we are not just running the Skiayati in isolation, we have also combined it with the Atomos, which is the next weapon on our list, and that is the pistol that you see in some scenes which shoots this laser at enemies. Now, why is the Atomos on this list? The Atomos can be unlocked at Mastery Rank 5, and you also simply get the blueprint from the market, so everything easy peasy here. The reason why I combined the Atomos with my melee Skiayati build is because the Atomos is not there to deal any damage itself, I use it as a primer weapon. What is a primer weapon? A primer is a weapon that is not built to deal damage by itself, it's built to only deal specific status effects onto the enemies, so they are easier to kill with your main damage dealing weapon. In this case, the Atomos is equipped with viral and heat damage, which, as we all know, viral makes enemies way more susceptible to your damage, all while heat is by default on the weapon, but heat would also serve to halve the enemy armor, meaning you would deal more damage. Of course, given the fact that we're dealing slash here, it doesn't really matter because slash does ignore armor anyway, but just in case you go with a different type of damage dealer that does not do slash, then heat would be very great to have the armor. Alright, a little break here. In case you're still not that familiar with the game, then exotic concepts like status primers, as we just saw, might still be a bit confusing. That's why on this channel right here, I'm trying to explain Warframe as well and easy to understand as humanly possible. And if you feel like that's exactly what you need, then why don't you think about joining the crew to never miss out on any helpful guides day one from now on. Welcome on board, and back to our list. Do you like melee weapons but you hate button mashing? Then boy do I have the weapon for you. Actually it's two, and that would be the Reaper Prime or the Hate. Why two weapons in one slot again? Well, very simple, because Hate and Reaper Prime are pretty much two sides of the same coin. They're basically the same weapon, just with two different names, and that's very good because you can decide to get either of them. Why is that such a big deal? Well, because the Reaper Prime, as a prime weapon, is only available through Void relics, and the relics for the Reaper Prime might not be available in the game at every given point in time. On the other hand, the Hate is a drop from the Stalker when you defeat him, and the drop rate is absolutely abysmal. I think in my 2,000 hours of playing Warframe, I only got it like 3 times or something, meaning with a prime weapon that is not always available and a weapon that is theoretically available but also kinda not, it's good to have some variety. But anyway, both of these scythes are absolutely amazing in combat because they're not built for key spamming playstyles, they are heavy attack hitters. I mean, to be fair, the background footage might not look all that amazing, but that is simply because first, these are steel path enemies, and second, their corpus, with big shields, and slash damage over time is not that strong against shields. The fact that I'm even able to hold my own with the Hate here only shows how good it truly is, especially given this pretty mid-game build that it's actually featuring. So if you like heavy attack builds on melee weapons, then Reaper Prime and Hate are two very excellent choices. But let's talk about guns again for a moment, because the next entry on today's list is one of the very best guns in the mid-game area, and that would be the Fulmin. A lot of people in the comments have said that they absolutely love it, and I totally understand why. Being unlocked at Mastery Rank 8, it's fairly accessible even to newer players, and it is basically two different weapons in one. What I mean is, the Fulmin has two fire modes. On the one hand, you have your fully automatic assault rifle, and on the other, you basically have the Arca Plasmor, a big fat plasma shotgun that shoots one huge projectile dealing tons of damage. You can also see it in the background. I took the Fulmin into the highest level index run, and it absolutely shreds those corpus enemies there. So no matter if you just want to farm some credits in the index, or you search for a weapon that deals solid radiation, corrosive, or electricity damage, the Fulmin is your go-to, and also the versatility that it brings to your arsenal with its two fire modes basically being two different weapons is perfect, especially if you don't have that many weapon slots to work with. To get it, simply go to the market, buy the blueprint, assemble it, and that's it. Next weapon, next rifle. This time, one of the OGs in the game, it has always been one of the most favorite weapons of all players in the game, it has always been one of the most used ones, and it will probably always be. I'm talking about the one and only Ignis Wraith. In the past, the Ignis Wraith was only obtainable in a specific clan event, and only clans who happened to be in that event at that point in time got access to the blueprint. Everyone else did not. So if you wanted to have an Ignis Wraith blueprint, you'd have to go to one of the clan members of those clans and politely ask if they were willing to give you one of theirs. But gladly, that has changed now. Now every clan can simply research the Ignis Wraith in their Grenier lab in the clan dojo, replicate the blueprint, and build themselves this beautiful flamethrower. See, the greatness in the Ignis Wraith is, it is not only a very strong weapon in mid-game, in early game, and also in very late game, but it's also super convenient. If you're coming home from a long day of work and you don't want to concentrate, well, play the Ignis Wraith. Just hold down your left mouse button and everything dies. The next weapon is a very special one, because it is a melee weapon that at the same time also kind of is not, and that is just in general very weird and very busted, and it deals tons of damage. I'm talking about the Glaive Prime. Glaive type weapons in general in the game work very interestingly, but the Glaive Prime cranks all of this up to 11. See, with the mod Volatile Quick Return, you can throw glaives and make them explode mid-air, dealing absolutely crazy tons of damage to surrounding enemies, and the Glaive Prime is simply the best one at that. I mean, I get it, it is a prime weapon, meaning you have to get it out of relics, so you either have to wait for the relics to return or trade for them if you don't have them, but trust me, this one is one of the strongest weapons in the entire game, and if you can get your hands on it, absolutely do so. And in case you cannot get access to the Glaive Prime, no problem, you could also get the Zoris, which is a weapon that is always obtainable in the game, also a glaive, but it's not as strong. However, if you're playing still in mid-game level ranges, you won't feel a difference, everything is gonna die in one hit anyway. Oh, and by the way, before we get into the last weapon on our list, I want to mention one thing about the melee weapons that we've seen so far. As you saw in the builds, I ran all of them with a specific stance mod. However, I want to make sure that for mid-game purposes, it would be fully okay to even run all of these weapons without any melee stance mods at all. So if you go through your mod collection and you see that you don't have these stances, don't panic, just use whatever you have available, and if there's nothing available, then simply play it with the same build without stance mod. I guarantee you, it's still gonna be nice. And last, but definitely not least, we have the Amprex. Also one of the all-time player favorites in the rifle slot, the Amprex is great for dealing not only single target damage, but also for clearing entire groups of enemies if they're close together, because the lightnings that it shoots chain from enemy to nearby other enemies. To get your hands on this bad boy, simply walk over to the market console, get the blueprint and build it, and what you're seeing in the background might actually not be that impressive to you. Why is that? Well, simply because these are Steel Path Grenier, they have a lot of armor, and I only run an Amprex with corrosive damage. With just corrosive against Steel Path Grenier, you're not gonna get very far, but the fact that they die anyway proves that the Amprex is truly one of the greats, and if you read in the comments, you will see a lot of people mention, I also use the Amprex, I absolutely love it, because with a lot of crit and status chance, you can be very creative with the builds on this weapon and tweak it your way to perform multiple different roles with it. But of course, you don't want to just blindly copy my builds from this video, but rather go and try out your own. But if you do so, absolutely make sure to not fall into these modding traps right here. Also again, a massive thank you to Akimbo Fade, Niels V, Lamies, Doganium, Demon Lord Zell, and all other awesome channel members for your continuous support. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.